Dad, what's the future gonna look like?
Well, it's so great to see all of you. Thanks again for being here. We really, truly appreciate you being a part of this community. And the last few days have been really profound, and I think we've found there's a common mission amongst all of us, which is helping humanity go up. How do we raise humanity? How do we raise people? And today we're going to talk a little bit about how that's happening in New Mexico. Cyrus mentioned Eclipse Aviation. Eclipse was really our first jobs out of Purdue, happened to be located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we fell in love with the state. And I want to share a little bit with you today about how New Mexico is elevating its people. Many of you know that New Mexico has been a center of innovation for a long time, from the atomic age to space exploration. But how many of you knew that the state of New Mexico has a $65 billion sovereign wealth fund? A few, and many of you probably learned that in the last couple of days. But it's a little known secret. Unfortunately, it's been a known secret, but we want to change that. We don't want it to be a secret anymore. And they are using that sovereign wealth fund in really special ways to enhance the innovation economy in New Mexico. So to tell you more about that, I'd like to invite on stage Cabinet Secretary Black and Chris Cassidy from the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Come on out, guys. All right, so we're going to start with just a quick little video about New Mexico.
Hi, I'm Rob Black, and when I'm talking to business leaders, they often ask, why New Mexico? And my answer is, why not? We have 3 national laboratories. We have the second largest sovereign wealth fund in the country investing in companies like yours. We have the highest number of PhDs per capita in the country, highest number of R&D spend in the country. And for your workforce, free college tuition, it's 2- and 4-year degrees, as well as free childcare. If you're not thinking about New Mexico, you're missing out.
All right.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. All right, let's talk about the land of enchantment. Rob, tell us what's going on in New Mexico.
So there is a lot going on, and it is exciting because of, I think, what Chris is doing with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, with around economic development. We're really focused on, especially in the technology and innovation sectors, advanced energy, advanced computing, space, things that blow things up. These are all things that New Mexico historically has led on. I mean, how many of you knew that fission, fusion, and fracking were all invented in New Mexico? And so, but we haven't been really good at keeping that sticky. And so we're really looking at how we make those investments, leveraging Los Alamos National Labs, San Diego National Labs, Air Force Research Labs, and our research institutions to build that workforce. You heard we've free 2- and 4-year college degrees. If you're a New Mexico resident, if your workforce is in New Mexico, they're going to go to school for free. Your kids are also going to get free childcare, only state in the country starting November 1st this year. And we're using our Sovereign Wealth Fund that Chris helps raise the money for to pay for that. So it's a really exciting time to be in New Mexico.
That's great. And tell us a little bit, for the entrepreneurs in the room, what sort of incentives and programs are available in New Mexico?
So we have a variety of programs, and we will treat you with white glove service, and because we really want that investment in the state. Everything from industrial revenue bonds. Last week, we announced that we got a Stargate data center, only blue state in the country to get a Stargate data center, with $160 billion industrial revenue bond, biggest in the history of the country. So we're here to be business friendly, to help you grow your company, because what that does for me and my citizens is we're creating pathways to prosperity for New Mexicans. And we're looking for partners who can help us do that. But we're gonna help subsidize your workforce through our JTIP program. We'll help non-diluted capital into R&D or into building construction. So we're gonna be very creative. And I guarantee you, if you're doing manufacturing, we can be competitive with any state in the country.
Awesome. So I'll turn it over to Chris Cassidy. Chris is the Director of Private Equity for the New Mexico State Investment Council. Chris, why don't you share with us a little bit about what the SIC is?
Yeah, as Rob mentioned, we're $65+ billion. Our distributions, which will be $2.6 billion this fiscal year, fund around 20% of the state budget already. The projections by 2050s, it'll be a third of the state budget. It's a pretty astonishing figure in terms of the fiscal health of the state. You think of our main job, it's transforming what's a finite resource, which is our oil and gas resources, which one day will likely end, into a long-term permanent asset for the state. Historically, we've had some revenue instability because oil and gas is cyclical, and hopefully long-term, the growth of our funds, will help mitigate that. In terms of specifics, we indirectly fund critical government services, but we effectively fund 28% of K-12 education, 78% of early childhood education. And I think as a member of the team, it's very meaningful what Rob mentioned. The state set up what's called the Early Childhood Education Fund in 2020 with an initial investment of $300 million. That fund is now $10 billion. We'll become the only state in the country to provide no-cost universal childcare. We become effectively the France of the United States, is my joke. And it's very meaningful for us that our work goes towards that cause.
So Chris is an inspired and inspiring private equity manager. There's not many people like him in the world, and he has developed a new strategic venture capital program for the state of New Mexico. $1.7 billion invested in venture funds in the last 3 years, more than 30 fantastic fund managers that you've partnered with. Tell us a little bit about the strategic venture capital program.
Yeah, I joke that my day job is running the largest economic development program of its kind in the country. So the $1.7 billion, to give you some context, we committed about $1 billion in our last 4 meetings over the last 4 months, to give you some context. So, kind of what in the world is going on there? That's a lot of capital even for a $65 billion sovereign wealth fund.
Did you guys hear that? $1 billion in the last 4 months, okay? This is going fast.
And, the question is kind of why. And so the SIC has been trying to do this for 35 years to promote tech transfer and commercialization from our national labs. That is a resource that, most states do not have, as well as, incubate an innovation ecosystem. And it really hasn't worked the way we hoped. And I think part of the reason, or there's several reasons why, after a lot of study, we really looked around the world, what works, what doesn't, and why. And it comes down, in my view, to 3 reasons why these programs generally don't work. They're not focused on making money. They are much too constrained about the kind of businesses that count. We had historically a very rigid view about what count, which is really just comes down to where the company was headquartered and not really on job growth and what they're building in the state. And number 3 is people try to recreate Silicon Valley rather than partnering with it. And, rough figures, half of global VC is in the Bay Area. It is what it is. There's a reason. Once you spend time there, you understand just intuitively why that's occurred. But for a small state of 2.2 million people, the idea of recreating Silicon Valley is obviously, in my view, not realistic. So we've basically turned that strategy around. We need to make money doing this, so let's partner with groups who can make money. We have some noble causes we're funding that are the first priority. Number 2, let's widen the aperture about what counts. And we care about job growth and stuff being built in our state. We're not here to nanny state you about, where you're headquartered or how many offices you have. We care if you move to New Mexico, that's awesome. If you're already there and want to expand, awesome. If you want to build your 3rd manufacturing plant in New Mexico, awesome. Hell yeah. New Mexico is there to say hell yeah. Basically, in order to put that strategy in practice, what we've done is we've partnered with, in our view, tier 1 VCs that make sense for New Mexico. We have a very deliberate sector focus of folks that invest in deep tech, climate, and aerospace and defense, where we think businesses have a right to win long-term in New Mexico. And the 2nd and 3rd pillars of the strategy are what we call company creation and attraction engines. We do need some infrastructure on the ground in the state to both help build companies from the ground up as well as attract them to the state. And then the 3rd that is really developing relatively recently is we want to be there when it really matters. When companies want to build in New Mexico, how do we more directly support that? Because at the end of the day, we're here because we want stuff built in New Mexico.
And that's really where I come in, is those companies will get referred to us through partners, through Chris. He sends me probably an email a week of a company who's interested in deploying, and then we'll help site selection, we'll help build the package, and really work with them to be successful.
That's great. And we know about sovereign wealth funds in other parts of the world. We think of Norway, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, et cetera. Sovereign wealth funds tend to be pretty conservative. They tend to take a passive role to invest in things like infrastructure, real estate. You've taken a much more active role in developing the economy of New Mexico. Maybe how did you do that?
I think it was helpful to have an existing program, honestly. But I think thankfully our board has been supportive of making some very aggressive decisions. I think you do have to be bold. You have to stand for something as a community. We want to be the best deep tech and climate ecosystem in the world. And you have to stand for that and be a little bit aggressive and bold. Our governor had a great quote last week where she said, the SIC is trying to thread the needle. You can't be too risk averse, but you have to be thoughtful too, because for example, we do not make direct investments into companies. We let our partners do that. But at some point you do have to stand for something, and I think that's been one of the big changes is we want to be an outright leader in certain areas.
So you have the money to deploy, you invest it in the managers, you tell them, hey, help us get companies to New Mexico. But there was a little missing ingredient. The missing ingredient was, how do you help those companies actually land, actually find the talent, actually find the facilities? And to tell us a little bit more about that, I'd like to invite out the newest member of the UP partnership, Brian Adams, and also Carrie von Muench, who is the COO of Pacific Fusion. Come on up. All right, so first a little storytelling. This is kind of fun. I don't know if you see three people in those pictures from long ago that might look familiar to you. Brian and Cyrus and I have known each other for 25 years. We went to Purdue together. We worked at Eclipse Aviation together in New Mexico. And please give us a pass on some of the activities you see in the pictures there. But we had a lot of fun together. After our time at Eclipse, Brian went on to move to Seattle, ultimately joined Amazon and led a part of their Amazon Alexa fund, moved back to New Mexico with his wife and newborn during the pandemic, and as an inspired entrepreneur, tried to think about ways that he could impact the economy in New Mexico, and met up with Chris, and they came up with this idea. So Brian, let me hand it over to you, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what we're doing together.
Thanks, Ben. Pleasure to be here. I've been asking for an invite for 8 years. Finally got one this year. So it's great to see everything that you guys have built over those years. So I'm Brian Adams. I want to acknowledge my partner, David Ellman, here in the front row. November of 2022, I saw a headline in the Albuquerque Journal. It was about a year after I moved to Albuquerque. It was New Mexico State Investment Council invest $100 million to invest in America's Frontier Fund, which is going to create a new deep tech startup studio in Albuquerque called Roadrunner Venture Studios. I'm like, what does any of this mean? What's the State Investment Council? What's all these funds? And so I kind of made it my mission over the next year after that to start to really explore what was happening. Great part about being in New Mexico is a gentleman like Chris or Secretary Black, they're literally a phone call and email away. If you have a vision and a build, not just want to pontificate and complain, they'll take your calls, they'll take your meetings. And I met David about 2 years ago, and he had just moved to Albuquerque from New York City. His wife got a job as a pediatric critical care doctor at UNM Hospital. He's a multi-time startup founder, was doing some 0 to 1 iteration work, and we just started putting our heads together. Like, what could we do knowing that the trajectory of this program that Chris and the team were building was around the time like only $300 million. But if that trajectory continued, it was going to be billions of dollars, and as of today, $1.7 billion. So we just started jamming on some ideas. Should we build a climate studio? What could we do? But there was a bunch of this activity going on, and we decided that company attraction was the number one thing that we could do. How could we get the word out about New Mexico, the great incentives that are available, what's now a $1.7 billion venture capital stack allocated to companies with a presence in New Mexico? We approached Chris with this idea, multiple lunches, multiple coffees. He said, you got to go find a partner. So knowing Ben and Cyrus and the trust that we had over 25 years of relationships, I knew they were raising fund too. So that manifested in us partnering and getting an $80 million commitment from the New Mexico State Investment Council in November. We closed that fund in April. Our primary mission is to attract companies, what we're calling at their industrialization moment. So they've grown up somewhere else. They've grown up in California, Tel Aviv, New York. They have a small production facility set up, but it doesn't make sense for them to scale their production in the place where they are. New Mexico largely hasn't been on the radar. We've met a couple companies here. Secretary Black, I introduced you to him. Like big companies have sent out proposals around aerospace manufacturing, and New Mexico didn't get them. But we're going to change that. We're going to change the narrative. We're talking to, David and I are seeing about 100, at least being introduced to about 100 new companies a month. We're talking about 30, getting New Mexico on the map. And it's going bonkers well. We talk about the venture stack, we talk about non-dilutive incentives, and we talk about the state government and a bipartisan efforts to all row in the same direction to attract advanced energy companies, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, and defense. I spoke to many of the founders in this room, I think maybe 8 or 9, even ahead of UP.Summit. And so it's just been truly fantastic. And so thank you for the partnership with all of you, and one we're about to talk about here in a few minutes.
And let's talk a little bit about our first 6 investments.
Yeah, so we're a stage agnostic fund. So a relatively small fund, we invest up to $1 million. So how on earth would you invest in a growth stage fund? Why does that make sense? David and I like to say we're punching way above our weight relative to the check size we write. So we're really, beyond the check, want to be great partners to help companies build and scale in New Mexico, help unlock doors, help talk about the right people to meet, make those connections, make those introductions. So we've invested in 6 companies, from a stealth company that's really early here on the bottom right, but they're domesticating the physical supply chain, and I met the founder, and 2 days later he got a preemptive term sheet from Andreessen Horowitz, Lux, and Founders Fund joined. And he kicked pretty much everyone else out except for Up Abundance in New Mexico, because he wanted to see what could happen if you chose to build in New Mexico when they're ready for that. But companies like Reliable Robotics, who you heard from Robert Rose yesterday, they have a 22-person operation already in Albuquerque. They plan to scale and operate the very first autonomous flights for FedEx in Albuquerque. Hopefully we get them to build a retrofit and manufacturing facility in Albuquerque. We'll certainly be on the map now. And then, of course, our friends at Pacific Fusion. So they had a big announcement just last week. I'll leave that to Carrie to speak to, but go back one more slide, please. They raised $960 million for the Series A. It's one of the largest Series A's in the history of venture capital. We met Carrie back in April when they were coming to Albuquerque to start to evaluate potentially a site for their billion-dollar fusion R&D and research manufacturing facility. I like to think we were super helpful, and you let us come in for $1 million on that $960 million. And so it's a pretty wild opportunity that we've uncovered, but maybe over to Carrie.
Yeah, it's been so fun to see just how rapidly entrepreneurs, CEOs are getting excited about establishing operations in New Mexico. Carrie, you could have chosen any place. You were looking very closely at California and New Mexico. I happen to be a California resident, but I'm really happy that you chose New Mexico. So tell us a little bit about why.
Yeah, I mean, we're building $1 billion capital project, and when you're building large capital projects, it comes down to talent, schedule, and budget all the time. And for us, in addition, building a large inertial fusion facility, our research partnerships with the large inertial fusion national labs are really important, including Sandia National Laboratories and Los Alamos National Laboratories. And in New Mexico, we found a state partner excited to help us build quickly and capital efficiently, which is important, helps us fulfill our fiduciary duty to investors in our team. We found national lab partners excited to see us succeed, excited to actively collaborate with private companies. And we found a capital stack excited to help us grow and make us successful. Actually, we have a number of folks that have been on our cap table since founding who happen to be GPs of Chris's. And they were incredibly helpful in the early days as we started to evaluate where we should site this big project. And so all things, when you put all those things together, it was a hell yes to New Mexico. And we're so excited to build.
That's awesome. And we're thrilled that you let us into the round and we could support you in your decision-making around New Mexico. Maybe touch on a couple of things where Brian and David were able to really grease the skids for you.
So I was originally introduced to Brian by another investor, a mutual friend of ours. And it was in the early days of evaluating New Mexico. We were in the trenches on technical diligence on a number of sites, partway through entitlements on those pieces. thinking through what the capital stack would look like in New Mexico. Obviously, we raised a very large Series A, and we were able to do that in part because we were in the Bay Area with many of our investors right up the road. And Brian just became a person I could call with whatever random question might be on our mind, might be questions about city planning and permitting, some legislative questions, some questions about who best to work with on Secretary Black's team. And he and David were just such cheerleaders for us in our project from the beginning, and always willing to leap into action at whatever hour might be to help make this project successful. So we're really lucky to have them in the tent, part of the team, and excited for all that's yet to come.
That's great. So Brian, you touched on it a little bit, but maybe add a little bit more context to just the types of companies that you find are really well suited for New Mexico.
Yeah, it's the themes that were on the bottom of Secretary Black's slide: advanced energy, advanced compute, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, defense. All companies where New Mexico has a right to win, as Chris put it. And maybe switching gears a little bit, I think before doing this, it was 20 years, 5 startups, 2 acquisitions, Amazon, corporate venture capital team. Amazon's known for creating the ultimate customer experience and starting with the customer. But like in those segments of companies, in my 21-year career now since graduating from Purdue, I've never felt more product market fit in my entire career. Like we have a product which is a capital stack, an amazing economic development department, and reasons for these companies to build, and a market which is companies of any stage in these segments that are looking for the right partner to build their industrial expansion moment. And the conversations we're having with founders, especially when Chris and the team changed these rigid requirements from requiring very specific things. This was just changed in April of this year, and that really opened up the funnel. The funnel was super restrictive before that, but now the funnel is the world. David set up incredible partnerships around the world. We're getting deal flow from every single continent. And it's truly the ultimate product market fit that I've ever felt in my entire career. And it's like giving me the most energy I've ever had. And moving to New Mexico almost 4 years ago, never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be on this stage saying that in New Mexico of all places. And so thank you for everything you guys have done to set us up for success. But if we haven't talked to you, come find us and let's talk about New Mexico.
Chris and Rob, maybe just to close us out, share a little bit of your vision. What does this look like 5 years from now in terms of what the Sovereign Wealth Fund is doing? What's it look like on the ground? What's that innovation ecosystem in your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's the way we kind of look at it is one celebration at a time. Like Friday was a big day for us in the office with Pacific Fusion deciding to build in New Mexico. I think it doesn't. I think Secretary Black can talk about this. We're a state with 2.2 million people. I believe our workforce is 900,000 people. Every 100 jobs matters. And we're just looking at this point to increase the number of companies operating in the state, like one by one. And we'll go out of our way to fight to get you to be able to operate there.
I was born and raised in New Mexico, but ended up spending about 25 years in the Bay Area. And I got to come home in 2018. When I came home, it was one of the things that was really striking was the level of poverty that we do have in the state. Historically, New Mexico was a colony for over 300 years, longer than anywhere else in the United States. We have 23 tribes and pueblos. And there is a level of poverty that we want to really address as a state. How do we create those pathways to opportunity? Prior to this job, I was 6 years president and CEO of the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce. So I lean in on how we grow that economy is through the private sector. So where I think we see it is New Mexico is leading on defense, on space. We are leading on quantum computing. We've just made an investment, $25 million into a quantum innovation hub with Roadrunner Venture Studios. That's partnered with DARPA. That's bringing in another $140 million for a validation testing hub. So we think all of those things that our labs have been producing for all these years that have left, including Jeff Bezos, who left, who born there, left. Microsoft started there, left. The clean room started in New Mexico. Let's keep those things there and build pathways to prosperity for our citizens while we're creating wealth for your companies.
Well, you heard it here, 1.7 billion already from the Sovereign Wealth Fund, growing quickly, amazing natural resources, great talent, people that want to help. If you're an entrepreneur, you're at your industrialization moment, talk to us. We'll help you figure out if New Mexico is right for you. Let's give a big round of applause to our panel. Thank you so much.
The future is gonna be awesome.